It was an ordinary Saturday morning when he decided to go hiking. He wasn't someone who usually sought adventure, but the weather was perfect and he thought it would be nice to get some fresh air. The trail he chose was in a remote part of the forest, far from any towns or other people. The sunlight filtered through the tall trees and the air smelled of pine and wet earth. He felt at peace, enjoying the quiet and the sound of leaves rustling in the wind. As he walked, he noticed something unusual. In the middle of the trail, partly hidden under fallen branches and moss, there was a faint glow. At first he thought it might be a reflection of sunlight on a piece of glass or plastic. Curiosity took over and he carefully approached it. As he got closer, he realized it wasn't something ordinary at all. The object seemed to pulse with light, almost like it was alive. He reached out with caution, and the moment his fingers touched it, the world around him shifted in an instant. Everything went blurry, and a sudden rush of dizziness hit him. The ground seemed to disappear beneath him and the air felt thick, vibrating with energy. He tried to pull back, but it was too late. Within seconds, he was no longer on the forest trail. When he opened his eyes, he was standing in a place that looked like it belonged in a dream. The sky was a mix of colors he had never seen before, shades of blue, purple, and gold blending together. Floating structures hovered in the distance, connected by bridges of shimmering light. Strange creatures moved gracefully across the platforms, some with wings, some with elongated limbs, and all walking as if gravity was a suggestion rather than a rule. He felt a mix of awe and fear. Nothing about this place made sense. How could he have ended up here? He had no idea how to get back. As he took a few cautious steps forward, a figure appeared in the distance. At first it looked human, but as it approached, he realized it was not. The being was taller than most humans, with a regal presence that made him feel both intimidated and oddly calm. Its skin had a soft metallic shimmer, and its eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the colors of the sky. The figure moved with an elegance that seemed effortless, and a feeling of authority radiated from it. "You are here," the being said, its voice smooth but commanding. It wasn't harsh, but it carried a weight that made him stop in his tracks. "You have come by accident, yet the laws of our world have already decided your fate." He stared, confused. I don't understand. Where am I? Who are you?" "I am the queen of this planet," the being replied. "And by touching the artifact, you have entered into a bond that cannot be undone." He blinked several times, thinking it must be a hallucination or a dream. "Bond, what do you mean?" This isn't real." The queen tilted her head slightly as if amused by his disbelief. "In our customs, touching the sacred artifact is a declaration of union. It is not a matter of choice. You are now bound to me as my consort." He stumbled back, shaking his head. "Wait, what? I didn't agree to this. I'm human. I don't even understand your world." The queen's expression softened slightly, though her posture remained straight and proud. "It is true that you are human, and it is unusual for a human to enter our world. Yet the bond has been formed. You are, by our law, my partner. Resistance is unwise." He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. His mind was racing. How could he possibly end up married to an alien queen? None of this made sense. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words caught in his throat. The reality of the situation was sinking in. He was no longer in his world, and this queen, this being of immense power, expected him to accept a role he could barely comprehend. "Look," he said, finally finding his voice, "I don't even know how to live in your world. I can't do this." The queen took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. "You will learn. And in time, you may understand that what seems impossible now is your destiny. You will be cared for, protected, and guided. But you must accept the bond first." He swallowed hard. The way she spoke left no room for argument. She was not cruel, but her words carried authority that made him feel the weight of the situation. Every instinct in his body told him to run, yet he had no idea where to go. He was trapped in a world that was beautiful, terrifying, and completely alien. Slowly, he nodded. It wasn't agreement exactly. It was more a recognition that he had no choice. The queen extended her hand, and he hesitated before placing his own in hers. A surge of warmth ran through him, and a strange calm washed over his panic. It was disorienting, but it didn't feel threatening. The queen's eyes softened, and she spoke again. "You will need to learn quickly. Our society has rules, responsibilities, and rituals that are unlike anything you have known. You will not be idle, but do not fear. I will guide you. He nodded again, unsure of what else to say. His mind was still reeling from the sheer impossibility of his situation. He tried to remember his life on Earth, the simple things, the people he knew, the trails he used to hike. They felt distant now, like memories from a different lifetime. The Queen led him through the city, and he could barely keep up. Floating platforms shifted beneath their feet. Bridges of light connected massive structures, and creatures of all shapes and sizes moved around them. Every sight was more extraordinary than the last. He couldn't believe he was seeing this with his own eyes. He felt small, insignificant, yet there was a strange sense of wonder that kept him from panicking entirely. As they walked, the Queen explained parts of her world. She spoke of the laws, the culture, and the expectations of a consort. He listened, trying to absorb everything, though most of it went over his head. The world itself was alive, almost as if it breathed and watched them move. He realized that if he didn't adapt, he could easily make mistakes that might offend the people or even put himself in danger. After what felt like hours, they arrived at a grand building that seemed to be a palace of some kind. The Queen gestured for him to enter. The interior was breathtaking. Tall ceilings, intricate designs carved into shimmering walls, and a soft glow that lit the entire space. He couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. "This will be your new home," the Queen said. "You will be cared for, but you will also have duties. Learn quickly, observe closely, and do not underestimate this world. It is fragile, and it will test you." He nodded again, realizing that life as he knew it was gone. There was no going back, not yet. He had entered a world beyond imagination, and by a simple accident he had become part of it in a way he never expected. The reality was daunting, but beneath the fear was a spark of curiosity. He wanted to understand this world, to find his place in it, and perhaps in time, to find a way to survive and even thrive in it. That night, as he lay in a room that seemed too grand for any human, he couldn't stop thinking about the events that had brought him here. He had touched a mysterious object on a hiking trail, and now he was married to a queen of another world. It was absurd, unbelievable, and terrifying, yet undeniable. He realized that his life had changed forever. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of colors and lights he had never seen, of creatures that moved in ways he didn't understand, and of a queen whose presence was as commanding as it was comforting. He knew deep down that waking up would not return him to his old life. He had crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back. In the morning, he would begin learning this new world. He would be tested, guided, and challenged in ways he could not yet imagine. And whether he liked it or not, he was now bound to the Queen, and his ordinary life was over. A part of him trembled with fear, but another part, a part he didn't know existed, was ready to face the impossible. The next morning, he woke up to a strange calm. The room he was in still felt surreal, the soft glow from the walls illuminating every corner. He could hear faint sounds from outside, voices, laughter, and movement, but none of it sounded human. It was a mixture of tones, some musical, some harsh, yet all somehow harmonious. For a moment, he wondered if he was still dreaming, but the firmness of the floor beneath his feet reminded him that this was real. When he stepped outside, the Queen was already waiting. She stood with her back straight, radiating authority. Yet there was a softness in her eyes that made him feel less like an intruder and more like a guest in a place he didn't understand. He was nervous, unsure of how to behave, and painfully aware of how out of place he was. Everything about this world was overwhelming, its beauty, its complexity, and the unspoken rules that seemed to hang in the air like invisible threads. "Today, you will begin to learn our ways," the Queen said. Her voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the expectation behind it. "It will not be easy, and mistakes will be noticed. But I will guide you. Observe carefully, and you may survive this day." He nodded, feeling the weight of every word. Survive. That one word reminded him that he wasn't just a visitor here. He had responsibilities now. Responsibilities he barely understood. He tried to steady his breathing, reminding himself that panic wouldn't help. The first lesson was simple in theory, but far from easy in practice. He was introduced to the daily routines of the palace, rituals that had to be performed at precise moments, gestures that conveyed respect, and ways of speaking that showed understanding of the world's hierarchy. Every step he took felt awkward, and he stumbled more than once. Each time the Queen's gaze was on him, observing but never offering direct help. Her silence was both a guide and a test. He realized quickly that every movement mattered. A small gesture, a tilt of the head, or even the way he stood could communicate more than words. He had always thought of etiquette as something minor, something optional. Here it was survival. Every alien around him watched him closely, some curious, some skeptical, and some even hostile. He had to learn quickly or he risked offending someone powerful. During a break, he found a quiet spot overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking. Floating platforms stretching into the horizon, glowing bridges connecting distant towers, and creatures of all shapes moving gracefully between them. It was beautiful, almost hypnotic, yet he couldn't help feeling a pang of homesickness. He missed the simplicity of Earth, the feel of dirt under his feet, the sound of birds, the ordinary routines that never required so much thought. But the Queen had been right. There was no turning back. He was here now and he had to adapt. Slowly, he began to notice patterns in how the inhabitants moved, spoke, and interacted. Their world was complex, yes, but it had its own logic. He started mimicking their gestures, practicing their tones, and paying attention to the small details he had ignored at first. He stumbled often, but each mistake taught him something new. By midday, he was introduced to a group of officials who would be part of his daily life. They were a mixture of suspicion and curiosity, observing him carefully as if trying to decide whether he was competent or a fool. He felt nervous, but he forced himself to speak politely, bowing in the ways he had been taught, nodding at the right moments and choosing his words carefully. Slowly, he noticed a shift. Some of them relaxed slightly, offering advice or hints on the proper way to behave. It was small progress, but it gave him hope. The Queen walked beside him most of the day, explaining the significance of different rituals and traditions. She didn't do the tasks for him. Instead, she let him struggle and then quietly corrected him. Her guidance was firm but fair, and he began to appreciate the method in her teaching. It wasn't about showing power. It was about preparing him to survive in a world that was not designed for humans. He also began to see a different side of the Queen. In public, she was commanding and regal, every gesture perfect and precise. But in quieter moments, away from the gaze of others, she was patient, almost gentle. She would explain things slowly, sometimes smiling at his clumsiness, and even laughed quietly when he made mistakes that were small but obvious. It was the first time he felt that connection, the first moment he realized that beneath the crown, beneath the authority, there was a person who had expectations, fears, and hopes just like him. As the day went on, he was introduced to their food, which was unlike anything he had ever tasted. The textures, flavors, and even the way it was served were unfamiliar. Some dishes glowed softly. Others moved slightly on their own before he touched them. It was disorienting at first, and he worried that he might make a mistake by eating the wrong thing, or in the wrong way. But the Queen guided him, explaining the customs, and eventually he began to enjoy the meals. He even found some flavors surprisingly comforting, a small taste of home in a world that felt completely alien. Later, he was taken to meet the people of the city. Walking among them, he realized how different they were in their interactions compared to humans. There was a respect for hierarchy, but also a sense of community that was strong and unspoken. He observed carefully, trying to mimic their movements, their gestures, and the subtle signs of deference. It was exhausting, but he knew that understanding this was key to surviving and earning respect. At one point, a minor crisis occurred. A disagreement between two officials that could have escalated into conflict. Instinctively, he spoke up, offering a simple solution based on his human logic. To his surprise, it worked. The officials paused, considered his suggestion, and eventually agreed. The Queen's eyes met his briefly, and for the first time he felt a spark of pride. He wasn't just a guest anymore. He was contributing, even in a small way, to this world. By evening, exhaustion had set in, but there was also a growing sense of accomplishment. He had survived his first day. He had made mistakes, yes, but he had also learned, adapted, and even impressed some of the people around him. The Queen led him back to the palace, where he was allowed some rest. As he lay down that night, he thought about everything he had experienced. This world was beautiful and terrifying, strange and fascinating, and completely overwhelming. He had no idea how long he would be here or what challenges awaited him. But he also realized that he was capable of more than he had ever imagined. He had survived, and for the first time he felt a faint sense of belonging. The Queen's presence lingered in his thoughts. She was not only his guide, but also a symbol of the strange bond that had brought him here. Their relationship had started as an accident, but it was becoming something more, an understanding, a partnership, even if he wasn't fully aware of it yet. He knew that trust would take time, but he also sensed that with her guidance, he could navigate this world. Sleep came slowly, filled with images of glowing cities, floating bridges, and the soft shimmer of the Queen's presence. He dreamed of learning, of growing, and of surviving in a world that was nothing like his own. For the first time, he felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement, a feeling that he was on the edge of something extraordinary, something that could change his life forever. By the time morning came again, he was ready, or as ready as he could be. He had survived his first day, learned to follow the rules, and even taken his first steps toward understanding the people and their world. He knew that challenges were coming, that life here would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. But he also knew that he had taken the first step. In a world that was entirely alien, he had begun to find his place. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time he felt a glimmer of hope. He was no longer just a human lost in an impossible world. He was a participant, a learner, and perhaps one day, a part of something much bigger than he had ever known. Life in the alien world was far from easy. What had started as a strange adventure was beginning to show its more serious side. The Queen had warned him that this world had rules, customs, and dangers that he could not yet understand. And now he was learning exactly what she meant. It wasn't just about learning gestures or eating strange food, it was about survival, trust, and understanding a society that had existed long before humans had even walked the earth. That morning, the Queen called him to a council room. The room was enormous, with walls that shimmered like liquid metal, and a soft light that made the space feel alive. Around a circular table sat figures who radiated authority. Their expressions were unreadable, but he could sense tension in the air. These were leaders, officials, and advisors, each with their own interests and agendas, and all of them were watching him carefully. "You will sit with us," the Queen said, her voice steady. "Today you will begin understanding the political complexities of this world. Observe, listen, and act when necessary." He nodded nervously and took his place. Immediately he felt the weight of the room. Every word spoken carried meaning, every glance had a purpose. The council began discussing trade routes, planetary defenses, and laws that had existed for centuries. At first it was almost impossible for him to follow. The terms were unfamiliar, the concepts abstract, and the language, even though he had learned much, still had nuances he could barely grasp. As the discussion continued, he noticed subtle signs of hostility directed at him. A few of the officials exchanged looks when he spoke or even moved in certain ways. It wasn't overt, but he could feel their judgment. The Queen, sensing his unease, placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it gave him courage. He reminded himself that he was here to learn, to survive, and perhaps to find a way to contribute. Suddenly, a sharp argument broke out between two officials. One accused the other of mismanaging resources, while the second countered with accusations of dishonesty. The voices rose, and the room seemed on the edge of chaos. He froze, unsure if he should speak or remain silent. Then, without fully realizing why, he suggested a compromise based on logic, rather than tradition. The room went quiet. Every eye turned to him. The Queen looked at him intently, her expression unreadable. Then slowly the officials considered his words. After a tense moment, they agreed to try his solution. It worked, and the room calmed. He felt a strange mix of pride and disbelief. A human had just influenced alien politics, even if in a small way. The Queen's subtle nod told him that she approved, but he could tell that many others were still suspicious. After the council, the Queen led him through the palace corridors. "You must understand," she said quietly, "that not everyone will trust you. Some believe a human cannot lead. Some may even try to harm you. You must be cautious." He swallowed hard. The idea of danger was real now. He had thought the biggest challenges were learning customs or remembering rituals, but politics was a battlefield in itself. People could be allies or enemies, and sometimes the line between the two was impossible to see. He realized that surviving in this world would not just be about learning, it would be about strategy, observation, and quick thinking. Over the next few days, he was introduced to the intricacies of the palace's inner workings. He observed alliances forming, rivalries simmering beneath polite conversation, and whispers that carried far more weight than any official statement. At first he felt overwhelmed. He was a human, inexperienced in diplomacy and unprepared for subtle manipulation. But slowly he began to notice patterns. He learned which gestures conveyed respect, which words avoided offense, and how even silence could be used as a tool. One afternoon, he witnessed a serious plot unfold. A group of officials was conspiring to discredit him, believing that a human consort would weaken the Queen's authority. He noticed small signs, furtive glances, coded language, and gestures that he had learned to recognize. The Queen caught his eye and gave a subtle nod, acknowledging that he had understood. It was a silent lesson. Trust your instincts, but act carefully. He realized then that the Queen had been preparing him not just to survive, but to participate. She wasn't going to fight these challenges for him. He had to navigate them, learn their language, and defend himself using both knowledge and intuition. It was terrifying, but also empowering. He was no longer just an outsider. He was a part of this world, whether he liked it or not. That night, he reflected on the day's events. The palace seemed quiet, but he knew that whispers continued in hidden corners, and that danger could emerge at any moment. He understood now that this world was like a chessboard, and every action had consequences. A wrong word, a poorly chosen gesture, or a missed observation could cost him more than embarrassment. It could cost him his life. Despite the fear, he felt a growing determination. He couldn't go back to being an ordinary human. That life was gone. If he wanted to survive, he had to adapt quickly. He began practicing responses in private, testing how he would speak, move, and react to different situations. Every day he learned a little more, gaining confidence with each small victory. The Queen continued to guide him, but her methods were subtle. She rarely gave direct advice in public. Instead, she allowed him to make mistakes and learn from them, correcting him quietly when no one else was watching. It was challenging, and sometimes he felt exhausted, but he also began to trust her judgment more than his own instincts. She had survived in this world far longer than he had, and her knowledge was a resource he could not afford to ignore. One morning, he was summoned to a private audience with the Queen. She explained that the political tensions he had witnessed were only the beginning. Rival factions were planning moves that could destabilize the planet if not handled carefully. Some factions saw him as a threat simply because he was human, and they were preparing to challenge him in ways that went beyond words. "You must understand," she said, "that your position is delicate. You are not just a consort, you are a symbol. Some will support you, some will oppose you, and some will test your limits. Your survival depends on learning quickly and observing even the smallest details." He nodded, feeling both fear and determination. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but he understood that there was no other option. If he wanted to continue living in this world, he had to master its politics. He had to learn not just to survive, but to navigate, influence, and when necessary, defend himself. Over the next few weeks, he immersed himself in the political world. He attended councils, observed debates, and practiced strategies. Each day, he grew more confident, though the fear never fully disappeared. He realized that he was becoming a participant in a society far older and more complex than anything on Earth. Every decision mattered. Every interaction had consequences, and every observation could be the difference between safety and danger. He also began to notice how much he had changed. The fear and confusion that had dominated his first days were gradually replaced by awareness and understanding. He had learned to read people, to recognize subtle threats, and to anticipate problems before they escalated. He had learned to balance caution with action, observation with participation, and perhaps most importantly, he had begun to see himself as capable, even in a world that had once seemed impossible. The Queen watched his progress quietly, rarely commenting in front of others. But he could sense her approval. When she spoke to him privately, her tone was softer, more personal, and sometimes even warm. He realized that their bond, which had begun as an accident, was evolving into something more: mutual respect and trust, forged in the challenges of a world that demanded nothing less. By the end of the month, he had survived his first major political tests. He had navigated arguments, diffused tension, and even contributed to solutions that others had overlooked. He was still learning, still making mistakes. but he had proven to himself that he could endure and adapt. One evening, as he looked out over the city from the palace balcony, he reflected on everything that had happened. He had entered this world by accident, married a queen he barely understood, and now faced challenges that would have terrified him back on Earth. Yet, despite the danger, the confusion, and the fear, he felt a sense of accomplishment. He was no longer just a visitor. He was learning to live, survive, and even thrive in a world that had once seemed impossible. He understood now that this journey was far from over. Greater challenges lay ahead, factions, threats, and tests that would push him to his limits. But he also knew that he had grown stronger, wiser, and more capable. The political world that had once terrified him was slowly becoming something he could navigate. And with the Queen's guidance, he had a chance not just to survive, but to influence the world he now called home. Life in the alien world was slowly becoming more familiar, but that didn't make it easy. Every day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new surprises. He had learned to survive the rituals, the political games, and the strange customs of the palace, but now he was beginning to notice something else. His relationship with the Queen was changing. What had started as a forced, accidental bond was slowly evolving into something deeper, something that neither of them could fully name yet. It began with small things. The Queen would speak to him in private, explaining not just the rules of her world, but the reasoning behind them. She shared stories of her past, of the responsibilities she carried, and of the burdens that came with her crown. At first, he listened quietly, unsure how to respond. Her world was so different, so vast, that he felt like a child trying to understand a universe. But the more he listened, the more he began to see her not just as a ruler, but as a person who was both powerful and vulnerable. One evening, she led him to a quiet garden on a balcony high above the city. The air was cool, and soft light from the glowing plants illuminated their path. She showed him plants that reacted to touch, flowers that changed color with emotion, and small creatures that seemed to hum with energy. It was beautiful, but it was more than that. She was showing him a part of herself, a side that few others ever saw. "You have done well," she said quietly, her eyes meeting his. "You have survived and you have begun to understand. But there is more to this world than rules and rituals. There is the heart of it, and that is what I want you to see." He nodded, feeling a warmth he didn't expect. It wasn't romantic, at least not yet. It was trust. She trusted him enough to show him what mattered most to her, and that trust made him feel both honored and responsible. He realized that he didn't want to disappoint her. He wanted to learn, to understand, and to be a partner she could rely on, even if he still felt out of place. As days passed, their bond grew stronger through shared experiences. They would walk through the city together, observing the people and learning about their lives. He began to notice the small ways the Queen interacted with her subjects. How she listened, how she showed respect, and how she balanced authority with compassion. He saw her making decisions that were difficult, sometimes painful, but always guided by a desire to protect her people. Watching her, he began to understand the immense responsibility she carried and why her presence commanded respect. She, in turn, began to notice his qualities as well. At first he had been clumsy, unsure, and overwhelmed, but over time he demonstrated patience, curiosity, and a willingness to learn. He asked questions, paid attention to details, and sometimes offered solutions that were different from the traditional ways. His human perspective, though unusual, was often surprisingly effective. She began to respect him not just as a consort, but as someone who could contribute meaningfully to her world. One day they faced a minor crisis. A dispute had arisen between two factions in the city, and the Queen needed a quick solution. Normally she would have handled it herself, but this time she turned to him. She asked for his opinion, expecting a human perspective. He thought carefully and suggested a compromise that balanced logic and empathy. To his surprise, it worked. The factions accepted the proposal and the tension eased. The Queen's eyes held a faint spark of approval, and he realized that she was beginning to trust his judgment. It wasn't just the big moments that mattered. The small, quiet interactions built their bond as well. She would explain the meaning behind a gesture, share a memory from her childhood, or ask his opinion on a matter that seemed trivial but revealed much about her world. He listened, absorbed, and responded honestly. The honesty was new to her world, where politeness often masked true feelings. She appreciated it, even if she didn't always show it openly. One evening, they sat together in a room filled with glowing crystals that emitted a soft hum. The room was warm and quiet, a safe place away from the politics and rituals. He asked her about her past, how she had become queen, what challenges she had faced, and what had shaped her into the person she was. For the first time, she shared without caution. She spoke of losses, of moments of doubt, and of the weight of responsibility. He listened, offering comfort and understanding, not solutions or judgment. It was enough that he simply listened. In turn, he shared parts of his own life, though carefully. He spoke of Earth, of his family, of the simple pleasures and struggles of being human. She listened with curiosity and sometimes amusement, fascinated by the ways humans lived and thought. These exchanges created a new understanding between them, a bridge between two worlds that had seemed impossible to connect. Their bond deepened further when he faced a personal challenge. He had been asked to lead a delegation in her absence, a task far beyond what he thought he could handle. He felt fear and doubt, but the Queen prepared him carefully, guiding him through the expectations and possible outcomes. When the day arrived, he performed the role with surprising competence. The delegation respected him, and the Queen watched from a distance, quietly proud. He realized then that he was capable of more than he had imagined, and that her trust was a gift that empowered him. As their trust and respect grew, moments of genuine connection appeared. Sometimes they would walk through the city without ceremony, observing ordinary life. He would point out things that amused him or puzzled him, and she would explain the deeper meaning behind them. Laughter began to appear in their conversations, lightening the weight of their responsibilities. It was a rare gift in a world where appearances and authority were paramount. He also began to notice subtle changes in himself. The fear and confusion that had dominated his first days were replaced by confidence and curiosity. He approached challenges with thought and care, learned quickly from mistakes, and began to understand the rhythms of this world. He was no longer just surviving. He was participating, contributing, and even shaping small aspects of life in the city. The Queen noticed these changes as well. She began to rely on him more, asking for opinions, seeking his perspective, and occasionally allowing him to make decisions independently. It was a slow process, but it marked a shift in their relationship. He was no longer a passive observer. He was an active participant in her world, and she treated him as a partner rather than a guest. One night, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the city, the Queen spoke quietly. "You have changed," she said. "You are no longer the uncertain human who arrived here. You have learned, observed, and grown. I trust you, and that trust is not given lightly." He felt a warmth in his chest, a sense of pride and belonging he had never known. "Thank you," he said softly. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance." She smiled faintly, a rare expression that softened her usually commanding presence. "It is not just guidance. You have made choices, taken risks, and learned to understand. That is what matters. That is why you are here, and why this bond, though unexpected, has become meaningful." He realized then that the accidental marriage that had thrown him into this world had evolved into a true partnership. It was not yet love in the romantic sense, but it was trust, respect, and mutual understanding. They relied on each other, learned from each other, and faced challenges together. Over time, this bond became a source of strength. When political challenges arose, he could rely on her guidance and insight. When he faced uncertainty, she provided reassurance and wisdom. And when they were alone, away from the expectations of their world, they shared small moments of connection that reminded them both of their humanity, even across the vast differences between their worlds. He began to understand that this was more than survival. It was growth. He was becoming part of something larger than himself, learning from a queen who carried the weight of a world on her shoulders, and discovering that even in the strangest circumstances, trust and understanding could flourish. By the end of this period, he was no longer the uncertain human who had stumbled into the queen's world. He had adapted, learned, and begun to thrive. Their bond, unexpected and accidental, had grown into something that neither of them could ignore. It was a partnership built on respect, trust, and shared experience, a foundation that would carry them through the challenges yet to come. And as he looked out over the glowing city, feeling the hum of life beneath him and the quiet presence of the queen at his side, he knew that his life had changed forever. He was no longer just a visitor in an alien world. He was part of it, and through the bond they shared, he had found not just survival but connection, purpose, and hope. Life in the alien world had taught him many lessons about trust, patience, and adaptation. But nothing could have prepared him for the crisis that arrived one morning. The city was calm at first, with its glowing towers and floating platforms reflecting the soft light of the sky. The air seemed normal, the creatures moved as usual, and he was just beginning his day with the queen when the first warning came. An alert sounded throughout the palace, a vibration in the floor, a hum in the walls. The queen's expression changed instantly. She was calm, but there was tension in her movements, a silent signal that something serious was happening. She turned to him. "This is your moment." "You must act." He froze for a second. Act? Him? He had handled minor problems, observed political disputes, and made small decisions, but this was different. This was real danger. The alert continued, growing louder and more insistent. He could see the queen's eyes scanning reports, analyzing data, and making plans, all in a way that made his head spin. He wanted to panic, but he forced himself to focus. The crisis was unlike anything he had imagined. A section of the city was under threat, a massive energy surge that could destabilize the platforms and cause catastrophic damage. Engineers and officials were scrambling to respond, but the situation was too complex, too technical, and moving too fast. The queen turned to him. "You must help coordinate the response. Use what you have learned. Trust yourself." He swallowed hard. Coordinate? He wasn't an engineer, he wasn't a strategist, he was human. But he realized that panic wouldn't help anyone. He took a deep breath and focused on what he knew. Observation, logic, and communication. He quickly assessed the information coming in, spoke with officials, and helped prioritize actions. It was overwhelming, but he tried to stay calm, relying on the lessons he had learned over the past weeks. The queen moved beside him, guiding him subtly, but allowing him to make decisions. She didn't do the work for him, she watched, corrected, and supported. Her confidence in him, even in the midst of danger, gave him courage. He realized that she trusted him to think, to act, and to contribute, and that trust fueled his determination. Hours passed like minutes. The situation escalated, with energy surges threatening more areas of the city. He moved from platform to platform, speaking with teams, relaying information, and making quick decisions. Each choice mattered. A wrong move could cause destruction, endanger lives, or destabilize the delicate balance of the city. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him, but he pushed forward, refusing to let fear control him. At one point, he faced a particularly difficult decision. 2 critical systems were failing at the same time, and there was no way to fix both immediately. He had to choose which to prioritize, knowing that either choice would have consequences. He paused, thinking carefully, weighing the options and considering both logic and empathy. Then he made his decision, giving clear instructions to the teams. Moments later, the system he chose stabilized, saving that area, while the other system was later repaired with minimal damage. The queen watched closely throughout, her eyes never leaving him. There was no fear in her gaze, only assessment and quiet pride. He realized then that this crisis was as much a test as it was an emergency. She was giving him the chance to step up, to show that he could handle responsibility beyond survival. And despite the fear that had gripped him moments earlier, he felt a surge of determination. He could do this. He had learned enough. He could act. As the crisis continued, he began noticing patterns. The energy surges had a rhythm, a sequence that could be anticipated. He called this out to the engineers, suggesting adjustments based on what he observed. To his relief and amazement, it worked. The systems began stabilizing and the threat gradually diminished. The people around him started responding more efficiently, following his guidance and the Queen's commands. He realized then that he was making a difference, not as a human visitor, not as a consort, but as a leader in this moment of need. By the afternoon, the worst of the danger had passed. The city was still alive, the platform steady, and the creatures moving safely. Officials and citizens alike breathed easier, though the tension lingered in the air. He felt exhausted, every muscle in his body tense, his mind buzzing with calculations and decisions. But there was also a deep sense of accomplishment. He had faced a challenge unlike any other and had survived, not just physically but intellectually and emotionally. The Queen approached him, her expression softening. "You did well," she said. "You acted quickly, thought clearly, and guided others when they needed it most. You have proven yourself today." He shook his head, still overwhelmed. I just tried to do what I thought was right." "I don't know if it was enough," she smiled faintly. "It was more than enough. You have shown courage, intelligence, and the ability to adapt. You are not just surviving, you are contributing. That is what matters." He felt a warmth in his chest, a mix of pride and relief. He had stepped into a role he never imagined, guided by a queen who trusted him and a society that had doubted him. For the first time, he realized that he was not merely a human in an alien world. He was part of it, and his actions mattered. In the days that followed, the city slowly recovered. Repairs were made, minor adjustments implemented, and life returned to its unusual but beautiful rhythm. The Queen continued to guide him, but now she did so with an added layer of respect and acknowledgement. He had faced real danger and emerged capable. He had proven to himself and to others that he could handle responsibility on a scale he had never known. He also noticed changes within himself. Fear was no longer his constant companion. Confidence had replaced some of the doubt that had dominated his early days. He was still learning, still observing, still cautious, but he now understood that he was capable of action, decision, and leadership. The experience had transformed him not just in skill but in mindset. The Queen and he spent quiet moments together after the crisis. They walked through the gardens, observing the recovery efforts, and shared thoughts about the challenges they had faced. He realized how much he had grown under her guidance, and she, in turn, seemed to appreciate his courage and perspective. Their bond deepened further, strengthened by shared experience and mutual respect. One evening, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the glowing city, he felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. He had entered this world by accident, married a queen unexpectedly, and faced dangers he could never have imagined. Yet here he was, surviving, contributing, and connecting in a world that had once seemed impossible. The Queen spoke softly, her voice carrying over the hum of the city below. "You have proven yourself, not just in this crisis, but in the way you have learned, adapted, and grown. You are more than I expected, and that is saying much." He smiled faintly, feeling a mix of humility and pride. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance. You taught me how to see, how to think, and how to act. You didn't just protect me, you made me capable of protecting others." She nodded, a rare softness in her expression. "That is what true partnership is. We face challenges together, and we grow together. You have done more than survive. You have begun to thrive." In that moment, he understood the depth of his journey. Life in this alien world was no longer about fear or confusion. It was about trust, courage, and the willingness to step forward when it mattered most. The crisis had tested him, shaped him, and revealed a strength he had never known existed. He also understood that the bond with the Queen was now stronger than ever. It was built on shared experience, respect, and the realization that together, they could face challenges that neither could face alone. It was a bond that went beyond accident or obligation. It was partnership in its truest form. As night fell and the city settled into a calm glow, he reflected on everything that had happened. The alien world, once overwhelming and terrifying, was now a place where he could act, influence, and belong. The crisis had changed everything. It had tested his limits, expanded his understanding, and shown him that he was capable of more than he had ever imagined. He knew that challenges would continue to come, that the world was still unpredictable and sometimes dangerous. But he also knew that he was ready, With the Queen at his side and the trust and respect they had built, he felt capable of facing whatever the future held. For the first time, he truly understood what it meant to be part of this world. Not just a visitor, not just a consort, but a participant, a leader, and someone whose actions could shape the lives of others. The alien world had tested him, and he had risen to the challenge. Life had changed completely for him. The world he had accidentally entered, the alien city, and the Queen he had married. Everything that had once seemed impossible was now part of his daily reality. It had been weeks since the crisis that had tested his courage, and in that time he had grown in ways he never imagined. The fear and confusion that had filled his first days had been replaced by confidence, understanding, and a sense of belonging he had never known. The morning began quietly, with soft light filtering through the glowing walls of the palace. The city outside was waking, platforms shifting gently, creatures moving gracefully, and the hum of life filling the air. He walked alongside the Queen, their steps in rhythm as they moved through the palace gardens. For the first time, the world felt less alien and more like a place where he could exist. Not as an outsider, but as someone who had a role, a responsibility, and a purpose. The Queen spoke softly, sharing thoughts about the city and its people, about challenges that lay ahead and plans to strengthen the community. He listened carefully, absorbing every word, asking questions when he didn't understand, and offering suggestions based on what he had learned. The balance between his perspective as a human and her perspective as a leader created discussions that were both thoughtful and practical. She looked at him with respect, and he realized that their partnership had reached a level where each could rely on the other's judgment. Throughout the day, he moved among the people of the city. He saw children learning to navigate the floating platforms, workers managing the energy systems, and officials coordinating tasks. He realized how much he had learned about this world, the subtle signs of communication, the gestures that conveyed meaning, and the unspoken rules that governed interactions. He began to see patterns, understand motivations, and even anticipate problems before they arose. The alien world, once overwhelming, was now a place where he could act with thought and care. During a midday assembly, he spoke before a group of citizens for the first time. He explained the recent improvements in the energy systems, outlined safety measures, and encouraged cooperation. His words were met with surprise at first. After all, he was human. But they were also met with attention and respect. The citizens saw not just a foreigner, but someone who had acted in their best interest, someone who had helped save the city during the crisis. He felt a quiet pride, realizing that he had earned their trust. The Queen watched him from the side, her expression calm but approving. She had guided him, yes, but she had allowed him to stand on his own. He understood now that she valued action as much as thought, courage as much as learning. Their bond, accidental at first, had transformed into mutual respect and shared purpose. It was more than a marriage or a title. It was a partnership built on experience, trust, and understanding. As the day went on, he encountered minor challenges that tested his judgment. A disagreement between two officials required mediation, and a technical issue in one of the platforms demanded quick decisions. He approached each situation with a balance of caution and confidence, relying on what he had learned from observation, guidance, and experience. He realized that he had become not just a survivor, but a participant who could influence outcomes and help maintain stability in this alien world. Evenings were quieter, and he began to spend more time with the Queen in private moments. They walked through gardens, observed the city from balconies, and discussed the world around them. These moments were peaceful, but they were also lessons. She spoke of her hopes, her fears, and the responsibilities she carried, and he shared his own thoughts cautiously, knowing that honesty built trust. They laughed sometimes, shared insights, and in the simplicity of conversation, their bond grew stronger. He noticed changes in himself that surprised him. He was more patient, more aware, and more capable of managing challenges that would have overwhelmed him in the past. He could think quickly, make decisions under pressure, and maintain calm when others panicked. The experience had transformed him not just in skill but in mindset. He was no longer merely a human navigating an alien world. He was someone who belonged here, someone who could act, lead, and contribute meaningfully. The Queen acknowledged this transformation in subtle ways. She asked for his opinion on matters she would normally handle herself, trusted him with small decisions, and allowed him to interact independently with citizens and officials. Each gesture reinforced the trust and respect that had grown between them. He realized that their relationship had evolved far beyond accident or obligation. It was now a genuine partnership, where each relied on the other for guidance, support, and understanding. One afternoon, they visited a community hub where citizens gathered to share ideas, learn, and collaborate. He observed closely, noting the energy of the place, the ways people communicated, and the small problems that could escalate if ignored. He offered suggestions, listened to concerns, and facilitated discussion. To his amazement, people responded positively. They trusted his judgment and appreciated his input. The human who had stumbled into this world by accident was now making a real difference. That evening, as they returned to the palace, the queen spoke quietly. "You have grown beyond what I expected, not just in skill but in understanding. You have become part of this world, not merely a visitor. That is something rare, and it is something I value deeply." He felt a warmth in his chest, a mixture of pride, relief, and gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance," he said. "You didn't just show me how to survive, you helped me see how to contribute, how to act, and how to understand." She nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "And you have learned well. That is why our bond matters. It is not just tradition, or obligation, or law. It is partnership. You have proven yourself worthy not by chance but through effort, courage, and care." He realized then that the journey he had begun by accident had transformed his entire life. He had arrived as a confused human, overwhelmed by the alien world and the responsibilities thrust upon him. Now he was confident, capable, and respected. He had faced challenges that tested his courage, intelligence, and resilience, and he had succeeded. The city itself seemed to reflect this change. The glowing platforms were stable, energy systems balanced, and citizens moving with renewed confidence. He could see the difference his actions had made, small but meaningful, and he felt a deep sense of purpose. This world, once foreign and frightening, had become home, not just because of the city or the palace, but because of the bonds he had formed, the trust he had earned, and the life he had built. He spent quiet moments reflecting on the journey. From the day he had stumbled onto the mysterious artifact, to the moment he met the queen, to the crisis that had tested him, every step had shaped him. He had learned to observe, adapt, and act. He had discovered courage he didn't know he possessed, intelligence he had never applied, and resilience that had been hidden beneath fear. He realized that the world had not changed him entirely. He had changed within it, grown stronger, wiser, and more capable. Even the queen's presence had transformed from something intimidating to something supportive and inspiring. At first she had seemed distant, regal, and unapproachable. Now she was a partner, a guide, and a trusted companion. Their bond, born from accident, had evolved into mutual respect and understanding, a connection that went beyond duty, obligation, or law. As night fell, he stood on a balcony overlooking the glowing city, the hum of life beneath him and the quiet presence of the queen at his side. He felt a sense of peace he had never known. The world was vast, complex, and still full of challenges, but he had learned to navigate it. He had learned to survive, to contribute, and to thrive. He was no longer an outsider. He was a participant, a partner, and a part of something greater than himself. He realized that the accident that had brought him here was, in a strange way, a turning point. It had forced him out of his comfort zone, challenged his abilities, and shaped him into someone capable of facing the unknown. The human who had arrived by chance was no longer the same person. He was stronger, wiser, and deeply connected to a world that had once seemed impossible. The queen turned to him, her eyes reflecting the lights of the city. "You have found your place here," she said softly. "Not by accident, but by effort, courage, and understanding. That is something rare, and it is something that cannot be undone." He nodded, feeling the truth of her words in his heart. "I have learned more than I ever imagined," he said. "Not just about this world, but about myself. I know now that I can face challenges, make decisions, and act with purpose. I have found my place thanks to you in this world that welcomed me." She smiled faintly, her expression softening. "And you have given this world something as well. You have shown courage, perspective, and humanity. That is why our bond matters, why it has grown, and why it will endure. Together we are stronger than we ever could be alone." He looked out over the city, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had been unexpected, challenging, and sometimes frightening, but it had transformed him completely. He had arrived by accident, married a queen, and faced dangers he could never have imagined. Yet he had survived, adapted, and found connection, purpose, and belonging. And as he stood there, sighed,